Welcome to the Boss It Weekly podcast, a no-nonsense, no-hype, frank and close-up analysis of what is currently working and what is not in the world of software. The Boss It podcast is packed with major takeaways for software business owners and managers. So, let's begin.
Today I'm bringing to you somebody who is within the industry but has also they've worked with the England football team, they've published a book, they've got a business that is out there is about building engagement with employees, which is very topical at this time. So welcome, Ben Williams.
Thank you. Thanks, Mark, for having me on. How are you?
Very good. How many podcasts have you been on recently? Have you done many?
Yeah, I've done quite a few just because of book stuff and just opportunities that have popped up. So quite a few. Good sort of probably around 40.
Yeah,
40.
well.
A lot during COVID, that's for sure.
Yes, I can imagine. And do you listen to many podcasts yourself?
I do. I haven't listened to as many recently. I like Helen and Sarah from the Squiggly Careers. I'm a big fan of Dan Murray Carter, Serta, should get his name right, who does Secret Leaders. And then I love a little bit of the Monkey Cage, Infinite Monkey Cage with Brian Cox. So a few business things in there, and a little bit of deep space thinking at the same time.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit. I want to talk a bit about your book, The Commando Mindset, which is being published by Penguin.
Yeah.
And that comes out in January, so beginning of 2021, which is not too far off now.
Yeah, January the 14th it lands.
Excellent. Well, tell us a little bit about what got you into joining the Marines.
So, like I said off air, but I'm not really one to go on about my own sort of broken wing stories, but I found myself mixed up with the wrong part of life, I think is the right way to put it. I was using drugs and I shouldn't have been using drugs. I was working as a bouncer and getting myself involved in trouble at quite a young age when I shouldn't have been. And there was a real split in the road for me where it was go off to the left and you're either going to end up killing yourself or going to jail, or go and do something with your life and get a grip of yourself. And I chose to go right, which was to get a grip of myself. And it had always been a dream of mine to join the Royal Marines. My dad used to take us to the museum in Portsmouth quite often, and just along the way I lost my bearings. I lost that inspiration to join up, and it took some hard knocks in my late teens to make me realise what the potential career I was missing out on. It was actually on quite a dark day with my own thoughts. I ended up seeing an old Royal Marines advert on YouTube where a lad was stuck in the tunnel trying to get through it, and it was saying, would you stop here? Would you stop here? Would you stop here? And then said 99.9% need not apply. I just thought, I wonder if I have that 0.01% in me, and applied. And it was literally, I would say, dare I say overnight, but over a couple of nights of getting a grip and flushing away a few things I had in the house, which I shouldn't have, pulling out a set of what can only be described as a PE kit, a lost property PE kit, which I managed to find in the airing cupboard, and go and hit the roads and get some fresh air in my lungs and begin getting fit.
So
that was the journey.
Did you have any military history within your family?
Aside from World War II, where I think everyone has a link, we had my uncle who was a British officer in the Gurkhas and in the catering corps. He went through Sandhurst.
Right.
But other than that, and you won't mind me saying, dare I say, I wasn't that inspired by his career. I didn't even really notice it until I was joining up myself.
Yeah.
No, the decision to join the Marines was just from boyhood aspirations, and after sort of year of application and cleaning myself of drugs and focusing on what life is actually about, I found myself at the very daunting gates of the Commando Training Centre, embarking on my new journey, which was to become a Royal Marines Commando.
What did you think it was going to give you?
I thought it was going to give me an escape, which it did. I was young and naive, to be honest. What I didn't understand, or what I didn't realise it would give me, was a purpose, a set of values, and an ethos but more importantly, surround myself with the right people who were as good as, if not better than me, who drew out the best from me and showed me who I really am. I know that sounds quite typically cliche, but it's not. That's that environment where it's okay for it not to be cliche, where there are people around you who really do suck the best out of you.
Yes.
And you feel like you owe it to the team to take those 3 more steps forward when things seem very dangerous, very bleak, very uncertain, but you commit. And that's what the Marines really gave me. It gave me that sense of purpose, set of values, and the community, which I think we long for.
What was the first big impression? What was the biggest impact that it had upon you when you first went in? Was it the physical side of it?
It was a corporal, and I look back now and I just think, oh Jesus Christ! I had an out of body experience looking at myself, and it was day 1 of training. Literally, it was day 2 of training, and we'd been up all night. And we'd been thrashed all night in the foundation block. So the foundation block is basically when you sign up to training, you get put into this room which sleeps 60 people in one room. Yeah. And every bed is the same to the next. You've got just a wardrobe to yourself and that's it. And it's a very intimidating environment to be in. You know, it is, as you can imagine, like sort of the beginning of Full Metal Jacket. Yeah. I don't know what came over me, like this this sort of, I just thought I had more in me than I think the corporal thought. And we were all lined up, basically all in our pants. That's just sort of naked with our pants on, all shaved heads, looking quite gaunt and tired. And I stood to attention. I remember whispering to the guy next to me. I said, I don't know what came over me. I just said, I can't wait to get on that 30 miler. And the 30 milers, the final test, it's the pinnacle test of commando training. It's 32 weeks away from the moment I'm stood at. And the lad didn't say anything. I was like, we all stood there, we knew there was an instructor coming. And I sort of nudged him on the arm. I said, "Do you hear me?" I didn't even know this lad. I just met. "Did you hear me?" I was like, "I can't wait to be on that 30 miler." He went, "Shh." I was like, "Okay." And then this voice just boomed across the room. It's like, "Oi, who's that?" And I was like, shit. I think he might be talking to me. So I stayed still, hoping that it wasn't me. And then this face appeared right in front of me, his nose touching mine, and he's dressed in his immaculate uniform, and he's got his green beret on. He epitomizes a commando, and he got really close to me, and he went, "What did you fucking say?" And I could feel myself running into my shell, having this out-of-body experience, looking at myself with folded arms, tutting. I said, I don't even know why I replied, but I just went, I just can't wait to get on that 30 miler, corporal. And he went, "You'll be fucking lucky to get out of here." And I was like, okay, good. And he sent me to the floor to keep pushing the world down, also known as press-ups. And that was a very blunt introduction to the Royal Marines, where I realised, wow, this is a very long course, and that 30 mile is not tomorrow. It's 32 weeks away, which is 8 months.
Yes.
And as I got injured, actually, it took a bit longer to get there in the end. So, yeah, my first sort of introduction was me thinking I was an absolute big time, and being firmly put in my place by a very experienced corporal. And then, the rest of the experiences sort of followed suit from there.
How did that training, the initial training, change you? Because it must have done.
It is a lot, it does. I probably couldn't do it justice refining it into a minute or so, but what I say to people is it introduces you to yourself. And what I mean by that is we all know our capabilities, but for me, I think a lot of us restrict ourselves by our almost self-imposed limitations. Where I found Royal Marines training, which works exactly the same in the business world, which I found out in the last few years, it introduces you to what you're truly capable of. There's that whole "your body will go on if your mind lets it" type of way of thinking. And I really found that, and it takes a lot. You know, the only way you actually really learn that is when you're covered in mud, you've been in the field for 7 days straight, you're completely fatigued, and you're starting to see things because you're that tired. It's after that bit you kind of realize, that's how far I can go. Maybe I can go a little bit further. And it does 100% prepare you for what is around the corner. And what was around the corner for us was the height of the Afghan conflict. We were going there from training. And I think that's kind of different to what it is now. I'm not saying it was harder in my day whatsoever, but we knew we were going to war. So we knew the severity of our training. We knew you had to take it seriously. Not that you wouldn't, but you had to take it seriously because our training instructors, the Marines which were on the base who were training us as we were recruits, their friends were at war. They'd just got back from war. They'd experienced it, and they were training you in the now.
There was a direct connection.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a very sobering way of being trained. And so, you take it extremely seriously. You learn a lot about yourself. You learn a lot about other people. You learn a lot about what people can be like in a weak way. And you also see it in a very strong way. You see exactly what values really reflect as an organization, and you truly get introduced to the power of the mind. And it definitely equipped me for what was next, that's for sure.
So once you'd qualified, you'd finished your training, what happened next?
So I left Commando training and went to 4-2 Commando down in Plymouth, where I joined Lima Company, 7 Troop, and we were straight on to pre-deployment training, which was a year's further training, but as a Marine, as a rifleman within a unit, specifically preparing for Afghanistan. And we were deploying. I arrived at unit, I think, summer of 2010, and then we were deploying March 2011. So it was quickly straight into it, grab your kit. This is what we're doing. This is how we're training. Let's go to some exercises. Let's go and see the shittier parts of the country, and then we're going to deploy. And that's how it sort of followed. Off we went in March.
What was that like?
Afghan.
Were you prepared?
I was prepared as I could have physically been. I don't think I was prepared as mentally, and that's because nothing, I don't think, can prepare you for what you're going to see. Originally, we were told we were going to Sangin, and at the time we were told we were going to Sangin. 40 Commando were out in Sangin, and they were having someone killed every other few days. They had a really, really harrowing tour, and we knew we were going there or similar. And at the height of the conflict, when we were there, the IED threat was huge. So improvised explosive devices, the bombs the Taliban would make, homemade bombs, bury in the ground and just wait for UK forces or other ISAF forces to step on them. And that's where the amputations and the sort of loss of life was really coming from. So we knew we faced this, and we knew we were training for that. You know, a lot of our stuff was done around IEDs, how you deal with contacts, which is fighting the enemy whilst avoiding IEDs. It was all done with that in mind. And you train for it, you medically train for it, you prepare for the worst case scenarios. But there's nothing more real than the actual worst case scenario unfolding in front of you. And I think within the sort of first 5 weeks, maybe 4 weeks of the tour, it wasn't too bad. There was the farming season was still in play. And so when the farming season's on, they're cultivating the poppies, which they use for the heroin trade. So the Taliban put their tools down, they put their weapons down, they end up farming.
Yes.
The commanders go back to sort of Pakistan or other areas in Afghan to recruit. And then when the cultivating stops and the summer season starts to come in, which is around April time, the fighting begins. So you get about a 4-week window when you arrive in theatre to sort of acclimatise with the ground, acclimatise what it's like to be in theatre without coming into contact with the enemy. The first time I got into contact, all my training went out the window and I jumped in a ditch, and I didn't do what I should have done. But we all did it, and it was quite a surreal moment where it was like, right, we probably should do something here because I think the Taliban are going to kill us. Our commander very much got a grip of us very quickly. And within that day, we had several engagements with the enemy. I remember getting pinned to the roof on my own by a marksman and was stuck behind a log whilst he just took pop shots at me from what's called a murder hole, which is a hole in the wall. And then as we were running onto our helos at the end of the operation, a full enemy ambush took place, and they victualled up 3 of our helicopters. So it was a very swift introduction to the Taliban's capability. And I remember getting back to the base thinking, well, that was close. How the hell has no one been shot there? No one at all.
Yeah, I was going to say to you after that first day, because that's going to be very impactful upon you. When you were able to sort of sit down on your bunk and lay back, what went through your mind?
It was actually, it's strange you ask that, because I've written a piece in my book about that, which is, I think I took life for granted before I joined the Marines, and even when I was serving, and I call it pinned to the roof. That's the name of the anecdote, because that moment I was pinned to the roof where I couldn't see I couldn't shoot him because he was behind a wall with a small hole in it, just shooting at me. And I was stuck to the roof, and I remember thinking, this is it. Like, I've only been here a few weeks, and I'm just waiting for the round to hit me. It's that horrible feeling of waiting for metal on bone. And I remember lying on my sort of camp bed that evening thinking, Jesus, that was really, really close. Like, close, so close that the splinters from the logs are pinging you in the face and going in your mouth. And even on the helicopter, when we got on the helicopter, the rounds were coming through the cab, and you could see the holes appearing in the side of the helicopter on the inside, thinking someone's going to get shot here. And you lie there. I remember looking up at the stars. You have the clearest of nights out in Afghan, because of the light pollution is hardly there, and you see 3 times as much as you would over here. Yeah. I remember thinking how small we were, and like actually trying to. I was questioning the reason actually why we were actually doing this job in the first place. And you do reflect, but it's amazing, isn't it? And you know this yourself, and anyone listening knows this, is that we reflect at the time, but it doesn't take long for time to go by before we either go back to our old ways or we just move on. And I remember moving on quite quickly and not reminding myself of the importance of what I'd obviously reflected on. But 2 days later, we went out on a second operation, and unfortunately, a friend of mine was killed within 5 minutes of a 24-hour operation. And it's those moments when you realise how severe our job is, and how you have to carry on when the shit really has hit the fan and loss of life has taken place. You've got more injuries, and the enemy are attacking. It's a real introduction to the what we call the realities of war. So I don't think the first operation when we got hit was a reality of war, because it's a one-way conversation with the enemy.
Yes.
No one got hurt. The second time is, friends killed, and you realise what we're doing. And from that point where Dino was killed, it was, it was quite a bloody, difficult tour. There was a lot of people injured and killed from that day forward. And you come back different, but it takes a while to mature to what's happened and reflect. But I use everything that I've been through in the past now to help other people. What do we learn from those situations? We can either moan about it and feel sorry for what happened, or we can do those people proud, and we can take those experiences forward to help other people, and not just in combat, but in life. And I'll tell you what, I've used some of those lessons during COVID-19.
Yes,
for sure.
I was going to say, because something like that, it must feel surreal or quite alien initially. And I suppose your mindset has to change quite quickly to survive.
Yeah, we sort of established this very quick and easy to use model, which I've written about in my book called ARA. And it's an in the moment ability to think with clarity when adversity strikes. And it all comes from the sort of battlefield. When a friend's killed or someone's injured, you can't stop and mourn what's happened. You actually still have to get on with your job. That's the harsh reality of war, is something will happen to someone but you have to carry on. And when Dino was killed, we still had to break into compounds. And when we got into the compound, the Taliban were there, and you're straight into a gunfight. And if your foot's off the gas, it's going to be you who catches it up.
Yes.
And on reflection, and since sort of running coaching, ARA really stands for accept, remove, and adapt. Accept is accepting the situation's taken place and having to think, as hard as it is, but think with clarity. In order to move forward, you have to remove unwanted emotion. It doesn't mean you remove emotion, but you have to remove unwanted emotion that's going to cloud your judgment, which in the heart of combat is falling to your knees and crying over dead bodies. That's not what you do. You have to carry on.
Sure.
And then adapt to the situation and what's changed, what boots need filling, what equipment needs picking up, how do we now take the fight to the enemy? And you can actually apply that to anything. Now, it's not so easy to apply it to, and I don't encourage people to apply it to when such things as like relatives are lost and things like that. But I've used ARA myself this year when COVID came along and took all physical coaching workshops out and just chucked it in the bin. It was like, there goes my business overnight. But you can sit around and feel sorry for yourself all day long, or you can accept it's happened, remove the unwanted emotion and adapt to the situation. And that's, if you're clear-headed, that's what you do.
Because, whilst you were still in the Royal Marines, you got involved in training.
Yeah.
And then you continued that training when you came out, because I believe you had a medical discharge.
Yes. I remember my corporal in training said to me, he said, there's two of the proudest days in your life as a Royal Marine will be the day you pass out of training and then the day you pass recruits out of training. I remember after returning from Afghan and doing my command courses and leadership courses thinking, do you know what, I'd love to take recruits through. It's quite a highly regarded role, not just in the Royal Marines and in the British military, but globally, to be a commando instructor.
Yes.
And I managed to find my way into doing it and found myself working with recruits. And unfortunately, it was around that time that I kind of got sussed out by the doctor that my hearing wasn't in the right place, which he was correct. And I spent 3 years with recruits before starting to process for medical discharge because my hearing wasn't adequate enough to stay in. But it was right at that moment where it's just before the World Cup in Russia, and a certain Mr. Gareth Southgate wanted to teach his England squad the true meaning of values and take them away from their normal luxury in life. And so we had a visit from the England football team, and I was fortunately handpicked to be one of the 5 corporals, which was to deal and train the England football team over 3 days. And it was an incredible experience. I was almost like a giddy child inside, but externally trying to look very hard and unsympathetic when I was thrashing Harry Kane and Gareth Southgate.
What were the things that surprised you about them? Because you would have seen them at a distance and you would have a particular image of England footballers. But when you were up close and it became very personal, how did that change in how you saw them?
Yeah, there was... I'll be honest, it was their humility and actually how humble most of them were. You see the whole prima donna rolling on the pitch. We know they're very well paid. They live quite luxurious lives. Footballers do get a hard time. They do get a lot of stick. And admittedly, I was one of those people beforehand, even though I was a football fan, was still they're so overpaid and all this type of stuff. But actually, when I was... an amazing experience, but to be sat round a very small stove, a little flame, at about 1 o'clock in the morning in Devon, in a woods in Devon, sat opposite Harry Kane, and we were just chatting, and it was a completely normal conversation. And I remember sitting there thinking, I had to pinch myself at one moment because I thought, fucking hell, this is a really normal conversation. Don't forget that's Harry Kane opposite you. And we were having a conversation about, I actually was moaning. So I don't know how we got onto it, but I just started bleating out to him. I was like, because he spoke about, that was it. He could just come back from holiday. And I was like, oh, nice. Where'd you go? He went Dubai, and having a conversation about Dubai. And completely went over my head. He's probably paid thousands a week. And I went, yeah, bloody hell. Hasn't holiday prices just soared through the roof recently? I've just $3,000 to go to Lanzarote with the family. It's a dent in my pocket. And he just like, he's like, yeah, and just really, really like humbly and casually sort of passed it off.
Yeah.
And then in my head, I was thinking, what an idiot. He's probably spent like $3,000 on a dinner. But there was that real, like, it was such a humble chat. And I remember he listened to what I had to say. And I asked him, I was like, what is it like to score in front of 80,000 people at Wembley?
So was he England captain at this stage?
He got made England captain in front of us on the Sunday.
Oh, right.
Me and my mate Charlie.
Right.
He was with Gareth, and they had a private chat, and we were stood next to the private chat. And he got made England captain then, which was quite an experience to be next to as well. But I remember asking him that question that he's probably been asked thousands of times before about what's it like to score at Wembley in front of 80,000 people, but maybe not in that typical environment. And I remember he answered it in a completely different way that I think he would have normally to a reporter or a fan in the street. He was just really humble with it, just very open. So yeah, it's an incredible feeling, and it doesn't go away every time you do it. But then he asked me questions. That was it was a conversation. That was the biggest thing for me. And it's like, what's it like to go to, that's my dog barking if you can hear it.
That's right. It doesn't matter. Yeah.
What's it like to go to war? And we had that conversation around that. And yeah, it's just a great comment. We stayed in touch ever since. It's been 3 years now, I think. We still talk.
Was it Harry Kane who made the biggest impression on you from that team?
Yeah, Harry and Gareth. Gareth as well. And how much Gareth reads and looks into other parts of life apart from just football to learn from, big authors, big leaders in other parts of the world. And Joe Hart was a really nice guy as well. A lot of them are really nice, really good guys. And I would like to say, if they won the World Cup, it would have been all me.
Yes.
But they didn't. And people gave them a little bit of stick. But I think there was a hell of a lot more respect for our England team after that World Cup than there had been in the past.
Yes.
And I think physicality overcame, or tiredness, sorry, sort of came over skill in the end. And they were actually very fatigued by the time they lost. And there was, I point it out to people quite often, that there was something we spoke to them about why do you roll around on the ground when you get knocked over? What's all this face holding and all that shit? And one of them, I can't remember who it was, said, we're actually sort of prompted to do it because the ref and wins the... I said, why can't you just like go down and then get up and walk on? And then there was like this weird like conversation broke out about, we could do it that way. And I think it was my mate Danny, the big northern, who's like, next time you get taken out, you got to get up straight away, all right? Remember, you've been with Marines. And and we watched the World Cup, and we were literally, as a team, running a tally on it. We're like, anytime they stay down, we've got to drink a beer. And they kept getting up. I remember speaking to John Stones about it not long after. I was like, did you guys listen to us about that? It's like, yeah, a lot of lads talk about it quite often. And so, it's really interesting that you can make an impression like that. They're all great. Really cool guys.
I remember Brian Clough once talking many years ago about when a player's fined or when he cheats on the field, fine his manager as well, and it will stop that behaviour immediately.
Yeah, they soon go nip it in the bud, don't they?
Because that's where a lot of it comes from, is from the manager. Yeah. And he had a side, and we had many sides that they didn't foul, they didn't cheat, they played clean, they just focused on the football. So it does come from the top. Yeah, it's
so true. And I
it's about leadership, Harry, isn't it?
That's it. And I spoke to Harry about Gareth, and he was really open about it. He said Gareth's probably the most respected manager he's ever worked for. Harry Kane's worked with some of the biggest managers in the world. And you kind of ask why. He says because he says it as it is. When he needs to turn it on, he turns it on. But he's equally as empathetic and knows what every player's going through. Is it ironic, or is it a real case of leadership that Eric Dyer scored that penalty pretty much in the same sort of position Gareth Southgate was in many years ago when he missed?
Yes.
And at that stage of the finals, and that much pressure on his shoulders, and no one knows, but what word did he have with him? So there's so much of that within it, but it is all about leadership, and Gareth Southgate's an incredible leader.
Yeah, and I think that building a team does take time, and there are positive signs within that team that there might be better yet to come. And that's our fingers crossed as English supporters that that's the case.
Yeah, otherwise they'll need to take another trip to the Commando Training Centre. I think
exactly,
right,
that's right. Have that as a threat for them.
Yeah.
So you came out, you did some coaching, and then COVID hit, and then we come to looping. So tell us about what is looping. Unusual name. Where does the name come from?
Oh, so first the name comes from our techie, so our developer, who were literally like, what are we going to call this thing? And he just came up with it on the cuff, and sort of it just stuck, and we kind of all liked it. It's quite catchy, it's quite clingy. But maybe just to go back a step, when I left the Marines, I found myself coaching. It was quite enjoyable, but we found ourselves, so I actually ended up, my business partner's a former Marine, but we didn't meet each other until we were outside the military. And we ended up working with the likes of Volkswagen and Audi. We ended up getting a large engagement project with HSBC. I ended up working with some real big names. Facebook, went back up to sort of Man United, did some stuff in the football world. We just had a really good time. But one of the things we really picked up on was how leaders were struggling to get their people to engage with the business or the organization. You know, how do you make your people feel more part of it? And I think the word engagement for me, and especially since sort of building Looping, has been around the fact that engagement is actually quite a broad word. It's instantly assigned polls, it's instantly assigned surveys, it's instantly assigned statistics and percentages of how many people have responded and all these things. And actually what we found over our sort of coaching time was we were almost working as a bridge between senior leadership and young people in the business, and helping one another, both sides of the parties, understand one another. So why does that young person come to work? What are they looking to achieve? Are they here for a career, or are they here because they're so in debt they need to make X amount of money and this is the job they need to do it to? What are their values? Vice versa, how do you get young people within organizations to actually understand what senior leadership are going through? And I don't mean as a role necessarily, but as in mentally, as in what do these people physically experience the higher you move up in a business? And how we did that was we were running engage programs and workshops that basically took people out of work and looked at what drives them. You know, what's your goal? What's your ambition? What do you want to achieve? Why is it you do what you do? What are your values? And it was, we were just having fun doing it. Like we had HSBC, we had 3,500 people to train, just Tomo and I. You know, there was a ridiculous amount of people, and you can imagine sort of the size of the contract for two little former Marines, which are kicking around with commercial banking. But it was almost accidental market research where we were listening, and even listening to the head of people, HR, that this is what we struggle with, this is what we're doing. And for a couple of years, we you know, thinking, well, there's something digital here, we can do something, but don't know what it is. I was very cynical about tech as well, only because I didn't know too much about it, and I knew it cost a lot of money to do, and I kind of just liked coaching. But the nearer we got to COVID, without knowing COVID was coming, but looking back at our history, the more we were seeing this, you know, the alarm bells in mental health. And actually, mental health is a very end of the line thing in my eyes. If you think of health and fitness, you think of diets, you think of training, running, and all these things. When you think of mental health, we all, maybe bar one or two, we immediately go to depression, anxiety, drugs, suicide, all these things that are associated with mental health, even like not so much the darker ones, but having to talk to someone or ringing a chat line. And that really in our eyes isn't what mental health should look like. It should look like the mindset version of what the gym is, what health and fitness is to us, staying fit and healthy. And so we sort of looked at mental fitness and what that is. And actually, it's quite easy that when you strip it back, you know, if you can tap into endorphins, if you can tap into serotonin, dopamine, oxytocin, which are 4 pleasure chemicals, you know, those make us feel good. If you can spend time with people, you naturally release oxytocin, and you have that cohesion with someone. even within our 4 pleasure chemicals, we can feel good, and you can tap into that through exercise or through learning, through knowledge, through setting goals and completing goals and so on. And that's where we really began to lean with our work, is how can you tap into people's potential by tapping into what they enjoy or what they can go and tackle.
So just to interpret that as I've heard it, is you're talking about the more positive side of the coin of mental health.
Yeah.
There are the negative side, the side which is about depression and so on, but you're talking about also treating it and looking and focusing more on that positive mental health in the same way that you would your fitness.
Yeah, exactly. And as you can imagine, our work's somewhat changed. There's still elements of what we do coaching, and even through COVID, we work with several big clients again to run digital engage programs along the same way of thinking about positive mental fitness. And people are in a really bad place. A lot of people are in a really bad place. Some harrowing statistics came out the other day that suicide in London's gone from 22 a day roughly to 37 a day roughly.
Mm.
And that's London alone. There was 3 in Manchester University recently. It's just, people were very scared. It's doing a lot of horrible things to our careers, to everything so many people built towards. And we have been massively tested as a human race. Am I fortunate to have been to war? Yes and no. What I am fortunate for is it's taught me my capabilities. So when this horrible thing comes along, it's like, shit, I've got a mortgage to pay, I've got 2 cars, I've been living relatively nicely over the last few years, and now it's turning into I've got a bucket to piss in. Although you have, but metaphorically speaking, and what's going to happen to business and how long is this going to go on for?
Yes.
And it feels very lonely, but the moment you begin to speak to other people about what they're going through, is you suddenly don't feel so alone, whether that's an entrepreneur or just someone you're speaking to at another business. And that's where we realize that there's a huge piece in being able to talk to one another to get through a situation. That's how we did it in the Marines. A lot of what we do within Looping has come from Tomo and my background, because when I had to put my hand up and said, I think I'm really suffering here, I thought I was going to be made a fool of. My own way of thinking was, how can you put a hand up in front of a load of alpha males who have just come back from war and say you're feeling weak? It doesn't fit well together. But yet when I did, the closest friends put their arms around me and went, yeah, I feel a bit rough as well. Let's go and speak to someone. Let's deal with our problems. And that's what real teams do. And we have that ability to do that in the civilian world. Not everyone gets on with everyone at work. I get that. I didn't get on with everyone in the Marines. But we do, in a larger percentage, get on with most people. And the more we can be more open with those people, the more authentic and integral we are, those people. And if I told you this morning that, Mark, I feel pretty rubbish today, if you were a good teammate, I'd expect you to go, it doesn't mean I take the day off, but yeah, mate, let's grab a cup of tea at lunch. Let's get a digital coffee and just talk shit for 20 minutes. Should we do that? Yeah, let's do that, because that makes that person feel good.
I think you make some good points there, and particularly at this time with COVID, something that I've seen through meeting people at my local gym. So I go to the gym very regularly, not at the moment, obviously, because it's closed. And you get to know people through training. I go early in the morning, so I get there usually sort of about 6:30 and train for an hour, and you tend to see the same people that you get to know at a certain level. Some of them I've known for years. And I started to see, particularly after we came out of the last lockdown, that there were people there that weren't quite the same that they went in. They were reading in the media, and I think what we can sometimes see now in social media, because we're no longer as a community sitting down to watch news at 10, we're looking at a view of the outside world through lots of different channels. And sometimes those windows into the outside world can be quite extreme.
Yeah. And
the forecast that can be presented or projected can be quite bleak and dark. And if you have too much of that, I think it can become your reality. And there were guys and I've spoken to quite a few, I would say probably more than a handful, that physically are very tough, very disciplined people. Some of them have got military backgrounds, but they are, and some have confided in me, some I can see a change that I think relates to mental health. They are suffering because they have a little bit of, or more than a little bit, they've got a big concern about the future and that window that they're looking into the future. Some of it is quite extremist in view.
Yeah.
Some are coming up with, theories that it's all of the world's governments. I've had this from more than one person that have come together, and there are lots of conspiracies. They're using it to control people, and that is going to affect you if you really believe in that.
It's hard, isn't it? Because there's so much available for how we can receive our information now. With one news article, if something goes wrong in the world now, you will see it through an immediate access will be through almost 5 to 10 channels straight away, which you can access from LinkedIn, Facebook, even Instagram, Twitter, and then the news. And even on the news, Sky will report in a different way to BBC, ITV, and then Channel 4.
Well, Twitter now has changed because you can find out within seconds with live reports of people filming at that particular incident.
Yeah. And you almost live in this kind of distorted reality, don't you? What is true and what's not true? I'm not a veteran who necessarily, I don't think like civilians should listen to me and take just what I say. What I always pride myself on is I just bring a new perspective and hopefully can help people with adding something extra to their game. That's the only way I look at how veterans can bring more to the community. And that's the right way. And I've done that exactly with civilians. I've learned so much in the last 8 months with what's happened with COVID through people like yourself who've been talking to me and we have conversations. But I do go back to Afghan. And I remember a friend of mine losing his leg on a particular day. And we were like, that shouldn't have happened because it shouldn't have happened.
Yes.
And we dealt with the issue that happened by sitting around a fire, by being there as a team, just chucking wood and stones into the fire and discussing what went wrong, what went right. There was no distorted reality. There was no different things coming at us. It was just, okay, what could we have done differently? What can we do next time? How's everyone feeling about it? That's how we should, as human beings and as teams and as tribes, process information, but we don't.
Yeah. And I think you can end up with a very distorted view of the world because you're getting concentrated splashes of news wherever it is typically at its worst.
And algorithms don't help as well.
No.
In the sense of if you search for one thing, you're going to keep seeing that thing.
Yeah, and I think it can end up where people can be scared to set foot outside their house because they believe that things are far more dangerous nowadays than they used to be when they were younger. And that's a view that I hear quite a lot. But if you actually look at the statistics, the likelihood of you coming into a physical situation is relatively low. You always want it lower, but probably 200 years ago, if you were walking through London late at night, you were more likely to be murdered than you would today.
Yeah, you'd be filled in and robbed quite quickly.
Exactly, that's right. But that's not typically the perspective that I think people have, because in those days, the news would come to you via people who were actually there by word of mouth or by newspapers that would be not widely read. There wasn't any other way of doing it. But nowadays it's instant from anywhere in the world within seconds. And that definitely gives you that distortion.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
So explain to us what looping is then.
So looping's still going through its refinements, and it very much at the beginning of COVID sat within engagement. Where we've actually found ourselves in the last 2 months, though, is with an integration. So what the clever guys behind the keyboards have worked out, which I can't work out. They show me afterwards and go, look what we've done. That's really clever. So I never take reward for what other people come up with. The integration is quite simple. It works off a bot, which again is relatively simple to build. But each morning it would ask you there's a few mood gauges out there at the moment. But it would ask you, hey, Mark, how are you feeling this morning? And it would give you the normal 5 emoji faces of sad, happy, all the way through to excited. What we also have on our team, though, is a psychologist. And what we've worked with Jack over, our psychologist, is what are the, basic human emotions that we're going to feel on a day, in the morning, or how do we actually feel? And what we refine down to is it's only around 7. You have exhaustion, you have anger, sadness, happiness, excitement, and so on. And what you will get when you click on how are you feeling this morning, it will then automate a response generated from what you've given there. So if you pick the glum looking face, it will then take of those 7 human emotions, it will refine it down to the likely 4 that you're going to be feeling glum, exhausted, sad, angry, and I don't remember what the other one is. That's bad, isn't it? But that then gives you the second option. And that's all it is. And then you click on that face, and then you click on that word that's relevant to you, and that's it. That's all you have to do in the morning. But then what happens is, through an automated response, it generates an answer of a backlog of links, tips, real small well-being interventions that we have for every emotion. So we have, at the moment, 60 per emotion. So you can't even, 2 months running, you can't be sad for 62 days straight and get the same response. And what those hints and tips are aligned to how you're feeling. So if you put exhausted, we've got a load of tips and hints from YouTube video links through to diet things such as smoothies, through to just some simple tips that you can do, breathing exercise and all these things, how to get better sleep. That gives you there and there on the spot. So Mark said you're feeling exhausted. Did you know not having your phone 2 hours before bed and taking a cold shower can actually release melatonin, which is the sleep chemical which helps you sleep far better and helps you access REM very much quicker, which is rapid eye movement. And it's just loads of tips like that. And that's kind of our well-being part of it. The second part of it is then the information of each teammate basically gets sent through to what we call the team board. Every team has a board, so 5 or 6 people will be in these small groups, and it will give the overall sort of mood rating of that team that day, and it will show specific faces of who's feeling what. We believe as a team that actually that's really good. You should be authentic, and we have got the ability to turn it on anonymous or not, but you should be able to see how your teammates are feeling. If you don't want to see that, or you don't want them to see that, you're probably not in the right team, or we need to open up a little bit more. Because actually seeing that people we work with are amber or red or green, they really, really, truly ring alarm bells. And we've been working with the product for a while now, obviously, and making sure it works for ourselves with some small alpha clients as well. And it's staggering the amount of people which are like, wow, it's quite impactful when you see your whole team's amber. And so then through that, you can intervene. There's the ability to talk back to those people going, oh, you're amber today, or you're red, what's up, you okay? And just generate those conversations. And that's how it works on a small team. But overall, what we came to realize was no one wants to give their data across if they think HR's watching.
Yes.
or the prying eyes of the business are watching.
Yes.
So we thought long and hard about, well, how can you let a team see how it is, but also let the organization see how it is without giving away who that specific individual is. That HR director zooming in and seeing every single person. It's not good for security for people to feel comfortable to open up to their team. No. So all the teams are closed. So if you're not part of that team, even if you're a HR director or you're a leader of the business, you can't actually specifically see those individuals which are going to be red, amber, or green, but you can see the teams. Right. So you'll be able to see that each HR is feeling amber, tech's green, and sales is red. So you get a general understanding of the mood of your business each day. The clever part, though, for the leadership angle is that the guys on my team have calculated an algorithm created an algorithm that basically works off a data set that hits the mood points and predicts. So this is the biggest thing. So if I could tell you how your people are today, but I could have told you that 3 months ago, you're probably going to want to know. Are they going to be really happy? Are they going to be sad? It gives you an understanding of retention. It gives you an understanding of who's going to be performing well, who might walk away from the business, where the mental health crises may be, which team needs to be looked at. And so by using the platform for a month, it builds up that trend over 31 days that then gives you an idea of what you've been through, what you're at now, and what you're likely to go through. And the more that it's used over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 months, it's going to predict for 2, 3, 4, 5 months into the future. So you're going to be able to see not pinpoint accuracy, because things do change, but if your team are exhausted and have been exhausted for a month, they're likely to stay exhausted. And this is likely going to be the outcome of exhaustion, where we've used Jack, our psychologist, to sort of do some really clever predictions. So it's sort of not moving away from engagement, but it's merging engagement and well-being together so we can have a greater understanding of how a company feels, which is what we do need to know at the moment.
Very interesting bit of software solution that I think that could work with a number of other solutions or platforms out there.
Yeah.
I've done some work over the last 18 months in the area around HR software. I was quite amazed initially when I started to sort of dip my toe into that sector, looking at it as a whole, of how many solutions are out there.
Yeah.
And there'll be many that end up on landfill that don't survive. When there's that number, we're talking hundreds and hundreds of these. But some of those that start to gain a foothold, I think that there would potentially be some of those companies, perhaps there might be some joint ventures or partnerships, and maybe even an acquisition opportunity for you at some stage. I think it's a very interesting solution that you've got at the right time.
Yeah.
And I can see how you got there from your background. It's interesting to get that background.
But that was part of, helping businesses getting their people engaged, is getting them replying to things. It's how do I know how engaged they are if I can't see what they're, if they're not even replying to what we're trying to ask them. And that was where that sort of merge was of, well, don't do it for the organization first, do it for the people first. You're feeling like this today, why don't you try X, Y, and Z, which will make you feel better? And the guys are working very hard on making the product sticky, and so Let's Loop In, still working on our SEO, but it making it sticky and hooky for people, but then in also being able to provide a real large insight for the organization as a whole. And that's where we've really run with it. And it's very much ballsy attempt, but to merge two things together and give both sides of the coin something to work with. So it's looping. What's the URL? Yeah, if you go letsloopin.com.
Letsloopin.com, and it's building engagement that makes a difference.
Yeah.
The book that's coming out in January, Commando Mindset.
Yep.
That's going to be available
January
the 14th. Okay. That's going to be available on Amazon, I assume. Most things are.
Yeah, it's available for pre-order now.
Okay.
Amazon, Waterstones, and I've done the audio for it as well. So the audio book will be out the day of release as well. So January the 14th, Commando Mindset comes to the world after 5 years of trying as well, which is fun.
You've got a fascinating story, Ben. I like the way that it all links up, and I think you're working on something that's very worthy. So thank you very much for joining me on today's podcast. I think a lot of people will enjoy that. I know a lot of people listen to podcasts either in the gym. They're probably not going to be doing that quite at the moment, but they sometimes listen to it at night time. Several people have said to me that they use my podcast to help them fall asleep. Take that whichever
way you want. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Yeah, probably bad. But at least they had the first 5 minutes anyway.
Yeah, you're in their head for the next 8 hours.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you very much for joining that. And if you want to learn more, go and have a search for the book. Look up looping. Let's Loopin is your URL.
Yeah, letsloopin.com.
Building engagement that makes a difference. Thank you very much, Ben. It's been great to have you.
Thanks, Mark.